any job that has not ever thought about quitting that job, right? This is not a unique artist thing. I mean, if I
Right.
look at,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I feel, because that's the way I've always talked about the shifts in what my work looks like, which is just like, I mean, okay, so you take Tracy, you take my wife. She used to be a park ranger, right? Now she is an instructional design video maker. Those don't look, you look insane. Your CV looks insane, right? Like it had to make that shift, but it's a natural transition in her life. And so yeah, so like the idea that I used to make these like tightly rendered pencil drawings, and now I make large, flat, non-representational paintings makes sense to me. And my brother used to be in the Navy, and then he was in engineering, and now he's in banking, and so it's just weird. I think that artists either allow people to tell them to stand still and not move an inch for 40 years, or that they place that limitation on themselves out of comfort or fear or whatever. I don't know. So yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Do you want me to unpack my quitting story for the sake of your list?
I mean,
Okay.
there's two questions, and they're kind of the same question. Spoiler. I mean, it's kind of the same question. A different way to ask the first question, but yeah, please.
Yeah,
do.
I mean, the first question is, have I ever thought about quitting? And then the second question is, what would I do if I quit, basically, or if yeah. Well, I will say, if I could have answered number 2 successfully, I probably would have gone through with number 1. So what I think is funny about, and I will answer the question, what I think is funny is if you get to be my age and you start thinking like, I gotta quit, I gotta find something else to do. And that question, really, the unspoken part of that is, what can I do that I won't have to go back to school for, because I'm not doing that, right? And so then it's really great. You should just Google, like, changing careers at 50, or something like that. And they'll all say, become
I
an
have,
artist.
but it's been at 40.
Oh no, okay. But they always say, become an artist, And I was just thinking like, wow, I need to talk to whoever's making this list to find out how you seamlessly transition from a career in finance to a career in art, and don't miss one beat financially in terms of, like, the stability of your family. Because if that's possible, then I just need to know what I need to be doing in order to actually survive as an artist. Because I've been trying that for like 25 years, right? With limited amounts of success. But so yeah, to answer the first question, I would say I routinely think about not doing this anymore, but that is really, it's not the idea of quitting making art. It's quitting the idea of it being the primary thing that I do, right? And I had this moment when I was in college where, after my first year of school, I was like, I don't know, I don't want to do this. This is not what I signed up for. I was very frustrated with what art school was compared to what I thought I wanted. When you're in high school and you have a limited access to art education, you have an idea of what an artist life is going to be, and then you get to art school and they're talking about things that, like, you're like, how does this have anything to do with what I thought I was going to be doing, right? And so I left and I went into geology for a semester, and I thought, because that seemed like I know what I'm going to be getting into, right? I know I took a geology class. It ended up being the class that I thought it was going to be. There was no surprises in the geology education. And so I went into that, and then
What building was geology in at UT?
I mean, it was something up on the hill, but I don't remember. I mean, you and I both went to UT Knoxville, and so yeah, the more mathematic and scientifically minded classes are all in those buildings on the hill. And once you get all those prerequisites out of the way for an art education, you're never on that hill ever again, which is great because it was a lot of steps to get up. But so I have a very limited memory of the names of those buildings up there. But what the hell what was I talking about? Oh, I went into geology, and then and what I quickly realized was like I very much missed making things, right? And like I had never had a moment in my life where I didn't have the time to make things, but I was taking so many lab classes and to try to get caught up for a science major. I had so many like chemistry and biology classes and things to get out of my way that I had no time to make anything. And that's when I realized like, oh, I'm actually supposed to be doing that. I don't know what that is, but
Yeah.
so and maybe if I'd taken a beat and thought like, well, what else can I make that's not art? Then I may have like come up with that and gone a different path. But my solution at the time was just to go back to being an art major pretty quickly. And so that was like a very early lesson that taught me like I could quit this. And I that was always in the back of my mind whenever I would hit these walls career wise, which would just be like, yeah, I'm gonna stop doing this. And then I would remember like, yeah, I would stop doing it, but I would still want to make things. So why don't I just keep making things, right? And not fool around with going to a coding academy or whatever that I'm probably not going to understand anyway. So growing up in Nashville does not mean you know anything about music. And so I never took a lesson. I never learned how to play an instrument growing up at all. I learned how to play bass to be in a band. Like like a friend of mine was like, do you want to be in the band? And I was like, yeah, I should probably learn how to play something. And basically, if you can count to 4, you can play bass. That's kind of like it. But I would never call myself a musician by any standards. I just like memorized my parts and went out there and played them, and that was it. Like if they went off script, I would just literally just stand there and wait for them to come back to the part of the song that I knew. But yeah, what I realized was like even if it's not good music, it's still taking up a lot of time. So between 2001 and I would say, 20, yeah, there's like 10 years where I didn't do anything. And then eventually some friends of mine and I would get together in the studio building we were in Philly, and we would do just some improvisational stuff, but that was more for kicks than anything as well. So yeah, and then I haven't done anything since we moved here. And that was a long, 11, 12 years ago. So yeah, moving to Nashville, it was a quick reminder. Oh yeah, you're no good at this. Don't do this. Because it's like they say, whatever guitarist is on stage in Nashville is probably the worst guitarist in the room. And so I felt that way about moving back, in the same way that when I moved to Philadelphia, I realized I have absolutely no idea how to paint. Like, because it's just being quickly confronted with really talented people. It's like, oh man, they really did not, I didn't learn what I was supposed to learn when I was studying painting. But anyway, to the question of quitting. Go ahead.
No, it's the same. When I moved, we come from the same painting program, and it's like a good program, and you get out of school and realize that's just that. Then your education begins. I was in Boston, so big, Northeast city, where you could get around to like all the other cities and see all their museums and all their art scenes and all their people. And yeah, it kind of right sizes your sense of like how good you are or how important it is for other people to see your work, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we went to a really good conceptual school, but not so much for training the actual mechanics of painting.
Oh, I got
If that
that at
makes
SBA.
sense.
It does. I
Okay.
got that at SBA, and then I transferred into UT, so I could totally see that.
Yeah.
I was already at the point where I wasn't gonna get the like. I didn't know that it didn't exist then, but I wanted the conceptual stuff, and I was already practically graduated, but I had 2 years in
Okay.
terms of like. So so you got to Philly, like, is it kind of like a monthly thing? If you like, yeah, I'm gonna quit, I'm not gonna do this, or like the
No,
latest.
no.
Okay,
God, that would be mental torture.
terrible.
No, when I got there, I remember I was like really anxious to sort of like get out of the gate and get my work seen, which was wrong. And I tell this to people much younger than me all the time now, which is like, do not be in a hurry. And so I remember I talked to a couple of galleries, and that was the good thing about being in a town that was not New York, is that galleries would actually talk to you, if you reached out to them. And I got good feedback. And then I remember I tried to get in a couple of group shows and I didn't get in. And then there was finally a show, and I can't really remember. It was about seriality in work, and I was working on just nothing but related bodies of work at the time. And I thought, like, if I do not get in this show, I told Tracy, my wife, I told her, if I don't get in the show, we can move back to Tennessee. It's not going to happen. and keep in mind, we'd only been in Philly for like 18 months at that point, and I was just like that
Yeah.
unsatisfied. I don't know, anxious or whatever. And fortunately, I got in to that show, but
It's
anyway.
interesting, that viewpoint. Like, even back then, it was like, if I don't get in, we can go back. Because I've had much more recently, like, shows that seem like a shoe-in for the work I'm doing. And my thought is like, well, you guys really missed something. I mean, maybe I wouldn't
Yeah.
have been like that at that age. Like, I didn't go to grad school till I was like 27, which is crazy that seemed old to me. Yeah, it's
No, yeah.
interesting.
No, I'm not going to say there's not an arrogance in that, like at 25 years old, thinking like, well, I better get in this show, like that's, but that was more I don't know where the art market or the art world is at this point, but that was the time, that was the beginning when they were just younger is better, 30 artists under 30 kind of lists were coming
Yeah.
out, that kind of thing, where youth was the commodity, not the art. It was buy low, sell high kind of thing. And it could really,
Yes.
if you felt the, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna miss the boat, like, and I'm gonna be this guy that's overlooked for a while or whatever. But no, so I got over that, and I didn't really think about
Right.
quitting for a very long time. It's just honestly, the things that made me want to quit the most were those like post-show depressions, that every artist falls victim to, because it's just like you invest a lot of time and emotion into preparing a body of work to be seen, and you want to see some sort of measurable progress come out of that beyond the making of the work. You want to see some sort of accomplishment that you can point to and be like, well, because of this show, this next thing happened. And when those
Yeah.
stopped happening after a while, it'd be like, okay, well, maybe I've exhausted, maybe, whatever I can get out of this, maybe I should just move into something else. And really, what you're not ever thinking about quitting making art, because you're always just going to make art. It's just quitting the idea of participating in this market, right?
Yeah.
And so
I think that came late. I think that just all that came later for me, because I didn't get out of, I moved, I got out of grad school and moved here. So I did the opposite. I've been
right,
in Boston for all the time, moved here, and there wasn't this notion of like, I mean, I didn't have a commercial gallery until I was like 40, 41, and Red Arrow called, and then
yeah,
now with David Lusk. So I could see how, having had that, it would be like this rhythm that I wasn't familiar with. I was like scrapping to get the shows that I had. Yeah, but I think it does come for us, no matter.
yeah. Well, there's this like, I mean, it's just human nature that is like, if I can get this thing,
Yeah.
this, if I can write this down on my resume, this will complete me. and there's just this like, no, the show's over and my life is the exact same. And so then it's just like managing expectations and trying to decide like, okay, well, my life is the same. What does that mean? And then you realize, at least from my perspective, for me, it's like my life's pretty good,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there are things, there's just, if there are things that I really wanted to accomplish in the art world that people look to as success, then I would not be living here, right? And but I would say that the same way if I were still living in Philadelphia. There's only one place to move in the country to achieve the things that people point to as ultimate success in the art world, and that is like moving to New York at least for some time period. But my experience has been the more steps I've taken towards that, it's just like it's like a horrible video game where you're like, okay, who's the next boss that I have to defeat, right? And like so like you're dealing with certain galleries and you're meeting certain clients, and they just progressively become people that you don't want to hang out with, right? And that's when you're like, okay, that's why galleries get 50%, because they hang out with these people, right? And so the limited little steps that I took up the New York ladder, I quickly hit the ceiling where I'm like, I really don't want to go any further than this, because I was having just bad social interactions, or awkward to the point that like I just didn't want to talk to people, and so I wanted to go into a different direction gallery wise, and I've been very fortunate both in Philly and here, that's just like, oh, I actually like talking to these people, which is
Yeah.
a nicer way to think about putting together a show and thinking about having to, for somebody like me who really just wants to stay home all the time, that when and then when like when you go to your own reception, it's sort of like you got married to yourself, like it's that kind of just this endless series of hands you have to shake and people. And so like, but I actually like doing that here in Memphis, and so yeah, it's like just finding your spot, right? And I think once you find your spot and are no longer just like measuring your success based on this arbitrary set of rules that's set by people up in Manhattan, then you get more comfort and peace of mind with that,
Yeah. Set by them, but also adopted by like
Right.
hordes of other people needlessly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That said, like, I'm still I am still susceptible to being like middle-aged and doubting everything. And so like, the big quitting story for me recently was having a show, feeling like I worked really hard on it and getting absolutely nothing in response, right? And like and that was like that story is when I looked at my calendar on my phone and I dialed up my 50th birthday, which was still years ahead from this one moment, and I just typed in retire for my 50th birthday. And I told Tracy, I said, I just want you to know when I'm 50 years old, that's it. I'm stepping away from all this. And she was like, okay, that's fine. And like, unconditional support for, the 25 years leading up to that moment. And like that unconditional support would also be there for when I just decided to walk away from this or whatever. And all that did not mean that I was going to stop making art. It just meant that I was just going to walk away from the idea that I was going to even care about any kind of public dialogue or whatever. And so I put that in my calendar and I totally forgot about it. And then last year it was my 50th birthday, you know, and I wake up and I've got like text messages from my parents like happy birthday, and then underneath it, retire. Right there on my phone. I was like, oh my gosh,
You
I
hadn't
totally
thought of
forgot.
it? You
I
didn't
had not. I
even.
because I had just found a different gear in the studio, and I was like really, you know, just taking a lot of joy in making work. I had always thought about being in the studio as work, and it was really important to me to think about that as work. It sort of gave me value as a human being to think like, well, this is my job, right? You know, and so circumstances out of control in life then made me start thinking about art in a different way, and it really started. I stopped thinking about art as work, and because I think from a work mindset, I was investing more in the classes that my students and the classes that I was teaching, and so that felt like, you know, a purpose. And then the studio became more like therapy for me, you know, just this time to be alone and process things and try to take painful things and seize ownership of them and turn them into something, you know, somewhat joyful. And so that really changed the way that I thought about art. And like I said, like teaching was taking on a different perspective to me because I was having all these questions. It was like I was Googling like, what do you do? Changing careers as a 50-year-old, what do you do? And so I ended up reading this book. I think it's called From Strength to Strength, and it's written by this guy Arthur Brooks, and I can't remember who he writes for. It's not. I think he writes for the Atlantic, but and it was basically like, what is your purpose? Why are you still here after 50 years old? Like, you know, 20,000 years ago, you'd have been dead. So like, what are you doing? What can you do now? And a lot of it was based on the idea that like, you know, just by the fact that you've been alive for a long time and you have been working at something for a very long time, you have a lot of useful information to pass on to the next generation. And really your mindset at this point should be that, you know, geniuses typically peak at the age of 30. You're now 50. Sorry to tell you, you know, like, you know, like, I mean, from his perspective, it's like your best days are done and it's time to equip the next generation, right? And so I thought, okay, well, that sounds reasonable, you know, and I'm already teaching, so I should just be more aware of that in the classroom and be like, you know, this kid really wants to do this, so how can I equip them best, you know, rather than thinking about my teaching time as lost studio time, right?
Mm.
What is a better perspective to take on this? So I did that, and then I would come home, and so then it would be like, okay, so now this time can be about me processing stuff that I need to process, and so I was like I was in a good place, you know, and then I
And
just had a
then,
show and I liked the show. And then all of a sudden, retire, you know, comes up on my phone. I was like, oh man, now I gotta go through all this again,
I
you
gotta
know,
deal
and
with
I
my
did.
past self.
Yeah, I couldn't just swipe it away and be like, ah, that's funny. You know, I couldn't do anything like that. I really had to think like, oh yeah, like, you know, years ago I was really serious about this, and like I should at least acknowledge that and sort of like take stock of where I am now versus where I was then, and consider like, was old me right, or, you know, is future me right? And, you know, obviously I landed on continuing to go because I did finally come to this realization. It's like making art means something much different to me now than it did 15 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that. So I guess that's growth. I don't know, but that's where I am with it. Second question is, what would I do? And like I said, I probably should have taken some sort of career test. You know, that I would. I remember saying I just need somebody to tell me what to do. You know, which is like an okay thing to say when you're like 18 or 19 years old, but when you're 45, you don't want to be like, just tell me what to do for the next 40 years, whatever. So I I realized that what I like doing is organizing things, which is so stupid, but like the but what I really like doing is working with my hands and reshaping things, right? And so that's why I do so much collage work, because like I'm very aware that my brain is working in a different way when I have scissors in my hand. I'm just cutting out shapes and I'm putting them together, right? So what that's transferable to out in the real world, I have no idea beyond like film editing. Like I feel like I would have had a lot of fun doing that because you can, if you watch enough film and you watch enough interviews of people that make movies, you can understand how many times they'll recut a scene that will transform the way that scene operates, and also how it reshapes the idea of the movie, and then you hear all these like desperate things, particularly like in the Marvel world, where they're just desperately grabbing scraps of film and trying to come up with an ending that people will like without reshooting it, and it's like a miserable disaster or whatever. But anyway, I like all that potential, that a movie could be radically different if you gave it, that you would have one crew and a lot of footage, and if you just gave it to 3 different editors, they would come up with 3 different movies, and so I really like that ability. Now that's that's and when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be like a set designer. I remember particularly when like that first Michael Keaton Batman movie came out, I was just really taken with the amount of effort it took to build the Gotham set, the exterior set. And then, I've been watching Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window since I was 10 years old. And I love that entire movie takes place on a soundstage. It looks like an outdoor apartment courtyard, but it is entirely inside a studio, just so they could control every sound and every light and everything like that. And so those were things that I was thinking about for a while, and I don't really even know why I lost track of that. Maybe I should rethink that.